Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. I'm your host, James. It's my great honor and privilege today to welcome a gentleman who I'm a big fan of. I recently listened to his interview with Dr. Anthony Chafee, and it's an honor to have him on Carnivorist Chats. That's Irvin Dazl St-Louis. His journey and mine are very similar because we come from lengthy periods of plant-based background. He has recently turned carnivore and seen tremendous benefit from adding animal foods back into his diet. So Daz, welcome to Carnivorous Chats, my friend.
Thanks for having me, man.
Let's take a look, if we can, Daz, at what your background is. Where are you from originally, and sort of what was your diet like growing up and your influences, if you don't mind me asking?
I was personally born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, but my descent comes from Haiti. My parents are from Haiti, so that's my background. The Haitian background, we eat a lot of rice and beans, chicken. Sometimes it's fried, a lot of fish. A lot of soup, different soup, meat soups. There's a lot of vegetables that's mixed into that as well. So there's a lot of variety in our food. There's a lot of ground foods that we call it, like cassavas, potatoes, and yams and plantains and all that kind of stuff. Coconut, dashins. We eat a lot of that stuff also that we call ground foods, and that's very heavy in our culture. In our diet. It's something that I grew up in. I grew up eating all that stuff. So when I grew up, it was very meat based, a lot of meat and everything that we did, eggs, even bacon, and the regular cultural foods, Haitian foods that we had. And that's what the base of my life is from, I would say, from 0 to when I decided to become vegan, vegetarian around 21. So my base was from that to 21. I would say, and even when I became vegetarian, vegan, I also kept some of those foods, which is all the ground foods, all the plantains and all the cassavas and the dashins. That was always part of my food, my base diet, because I felt that those were essential for our well-being, and those were part of getting the proper nutrients and vitamins and minerals. And I really felt that those were essential for my upbringing.
Irvin, let me just ask, if I can, what prompted you? And you first started the vegetarian / vegan sort of plant-based way of eating. And did I understand correctly, 95 or 96?
Yeah, I started in 96. 96. I know in Dr. Chafee's that's 95, 96, but I'm pretty certain it's 1996. That's when I started.
I have to give you a lot of credit, Irvin, because back then, I'm sure there wasn't a ton of information out there, and certainly it wasn't as predominant in the narrative as it is today. How did you find that way of eating?
First of all, as you can see in the back, you mentioned the Lion of Judah. I'm a Rastafarian. I mean, I have no locks, but I'm a Rastafarian, and in those days, I had locks, and part of the Rastafarian culture is a lot of that. They call it Ital style of living, the liberty, and so food is a very predominant part of the lifestyle. And even prior to fully committing to becoming a Rastafarian and also having the lifestyle, I had read a book, a small book. I think it was called the Green Book. It was a Buddhist book anyway. So and the way that the author spoke about the importance of not eating meat for the soul and the life of the animals and the impact on the ecosystem. And it kind of got to my head too, and it kind of influenced me in a way. So couple that with the lifestyle, the liberty, my faith, the Rastafarian culture, it was a very easy transition for me to make and to sort of add the spiritual aspect to it as well, you know?
And I think I heard you mention to Dr. Chafee that there was something about Buddhism as well tied in there. Was that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it was actually a Buddhist book. and they were really talking about the life of anyway. I mean, it was. I'm not gonna claim that the whole of Buddhism is promoting a plant-based lifestyle, but that particular book was, and he came from more of a Buddhist philosophy and background.
Let's go move on a little bit. So you have then sort of ventured into this very clean, idle way of eating, sort of more vegetarian. In the beginning stages, were you including the fish, or did you just go strict right off the bat?
No, I was including the fish because it was a transition. So before I transitioned to vegetarianism, I stayed onto chicken for a very long time. So I was eating chicken for maybe a good 2 years straight. Every time we had meals, it was chicken, and eggs was still part of the diet. So I stayed on chicken. Chicken was my way to transition. So once I cut chicken, that's when I pretty much cut all the meat products.
So there definitely are stages to a lot of folks that I speak to, and some folks fall in and fall out, various ways of eating for various reasons, whether it was stress I've talked to folks, or it was just different dietary decisions or health reasons. At what point along your journey then, Irvin, did you find Dr. Sebi? Because I know you mentioned him, and we were also talking about how, and you mentioned to Dr. Chafee, how predominant his influence is, particularly in the African-American, Afro-Caribbean culture.
I saw a video of Dr. Sebi for the first time. It was in 99 or 2000. 99 or 2000 is the year where I stumbled upon him. And that even reinforced my belief and my position and the whole vegan lifestyle. So that was when I was like, whoa, this is it. This is the promised land. This is the true way of living. This is Eden. Once you get to that level of nutrition, you've made it in this world. So he was a really huge influence, I would say, between 2000, 99, 2000, up onward until maybe the mid 2005, 6, 7, something like that. Because the only thing I didn't like about Dr. Sebi is that he promoted not reading, and I didn't like that. I was like, I'm a guy, I like reading. He was like, oh, I don't read. He doesn't read books. So I always found that was kind of strange that he wasn't into reading. He was like, and I was like, well, I like reading. I think that's how you get your information. That's how you learn. Even though I thought he had a lot of good stuff to say, I didn't like that part. And after a while, going into more information, I started seeing certain flaws in his teaching, and that's okay because Dr. Sebi was the first one who kind of made me understand that most ailments, especially if they're chronic diseases, are metabolic diseases. So he kind of made me kind of look into that, the metabolic aspect of our life, of our lifestyle. Whenever we get a disease, we could somehow, some way, always pinpoint it. Maybe not wholeheartedly to our nutrition, but it's a very, very great indicator, considering that it's probably the only thing that we have full control over. I know there's environment, I know there's trauma, I know there's maybe genetics, but a lot out of these four things, nutrition is the only thing that we solely have full control, and we could say, you know what, we could decide the way we eat and how it's going to affect us.
For those folks that aren't aware of Dr. Sebi, he was a pathologist. I would describe him as an herbalist as well. Even though he called himself a doctor, he didn't actually have a doctorate or a PhD. But his diet was very centered, or the foods that he advocated was very centered around alkaline/electric eating for your body. And he was always talking about mucus in the body as being the big indicator of ill health. And he was also a big proponent of using sea moss. Is that the type of stuff you're eating after you read and studied him?
I did try sea moss a few times. I did used to put it in my smoothies whenever I got a hand of it. Of course, it was definitely something that I did use till not too long ago. I think was it last year before I became carnivore? I used sea moss, because I still thought it was something that was beneficial. All the 90-something 9% of all the nutrient that the body needs, and they promote it in a way that it's like the super foods, So I definitely did try it. For sure.
Let's talk a little bit about how you felt, because so many folks, for a short period of time that I've talked with, but again, like you, some folks have not a great experience moving towards a more plant-based diet. I actually, because I ended up being quite a bit overweight and eating all the wrong stuff as a vegetarian, a lot of the chips and junk, I got pretty chunky. So when I went more primarily whole foods, plant-based, I saw some benefit in that I lost weight. You actually felt pretty good for quite a while, right?
You know what? I'm gonna have to say this. I'm gonna have to say that I think that my genetics is fantastic. I think that metabolically, I'm a phenomenon because when I was on that diet, I have to say this. First of all, I trained and danced pretty much 7 days a week. So I was fit like nobody else. So physically speaking, I was very, very fit, very strong. That was the physical aspect of it. So my body, I guess, rejected a lot of the stuff. I used to go to the bathroom so often, so often, and I prided myself on that, thinking that it was a superpower. So I have to say that for my part, when I was a vegetarian, physically speaking, I did not notice some very severe physical illness in my body till later on, till I started introducing meat again to my body, till I slowed down in the physical exercises that I used to do. So that's when I kind of started seeing certain things that then I attributed to certain things that it didn't compute anymore. Okay, now I see why I had so much inflammation in my joints. Now I see why I had so much pain. Now I see why I had so much soreness. Now I understand it, because now even if I go hard, and any form of training that I do, whether it's dancing, whether it's physical training, or whether it's pull-up, push-ups, whatever I do now, I will feel like I train, but I won't be sore for a week. And sometimes I'm not even going to be sore at all. And I'm like, that's strange, because I never used to be able to do that much push-up the way I'm doing now. I'll do sets of 50 push-ups at a time. I'm 48 years old, and I'm able to do sets of 50 push-ups at a time. And I'm not going to feel sore. And I'm not gonna feel like tired, and I'm barely gonna feel like I did anything, you know. So physically speaking, I think my metabolism, I was blessed to have something that contrary to a lot of people, no autoimmune diseases, no severe chronic illness that prevented me or that from continuing my lifestyle. So considering that, I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to go so long on that diet, because I was metabolically pretty strong and very, very, like I said, I had a good system, I had good genes, I guess. I don't know.
I want to hone in on one part of that, Des. I want to hone in, because when I heard you say to Dr. Chafee how many times you prided yourself on going to the bathroom a day, it reminded me of my Whole Foods vegan plant-based days. And again, I was very much like you, thinking, man, I'm going nonstop. I must be detoxing everything out of me. And it sure as heck was. I mean, I could, at the end, when I got really, really sick, I couldn't stop. And then I got constipated, and just everything switched up, because learning from people like Dr. Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Berry, our guts are muscles, and they can get tired out. They can, and it will lead to IBS. And I heard you come to that realization as well. Talk to us about that.
The worst thing was the IBS and the flatulence. That was terrible. That was terrible. Anybody who knows me, anybody who's going to listen to this, they know that if I was in the room and if there was any form of contest, they could not test with me. It was terrible. Do not come in the room if I just farted. that was excessive. My sisters know about it. My friends know about it. It was just bad. It was terrible. And it was multiple times a day. I would say 20, 30 times in a day. I would have like severe flatulence and the bathroom, like I said, minimum 5 times, sometimes 8, 9, 10 times in a day. And I'd be like, you know what? That's cool, because I'm not full of shit. It's all coming out. So that was my thing. At least I'm not full of shit.
I completely understand the way you feel, and I was the same way, man. The bloating, the gas, the pain, and no matter how much I was juicing and adding seeds into my diet to try and create more fiber, it just got worse and worse. But let's talk a little bit, just to sort of clear the picture for folks, on how long you then did this for, before we get to the stage where you reintroduce meat back in your diet. And I understand that you also from time to time dabbled in a couple of things to see how they would work, but then figured out you might have been lactose intolerant. You may have put in some fish in your diet from time to time. How did that go?
Well, the fish was the only thing that sat well with me throughout the whole period of me being vegan. That was actually I was always looking forward to eating fish. I love the taste of fish, especially snapper fish, especially the way they do it in Caribbean culture, Jamaican style, or even Trinidadian, Haitians. The way they make their fish is absolutely marvelous. So I always dabbled in fish and love the taste of it, and it sat well with me. So that's why I would always go back to it. So for me, fish was always a go-to food. Foods that I did not include were seafoods such as crabs, shellfishes, shrimps and stuff like that, lobster. Those are the things that I did not mingle in. I did not really go into those foods until later on, much later on. I would say maybe the last 5, 6 years. That's when I really got into it. Obviously, prior to me being vegetarian, I did eat those foods, but after that, I did not touch those foods again. But when I started eating them again, it sat well with me. I didn't feel no way. It didn't make me feel nauseous or having to go to the bathroom more or less because of that. So that was okay when I did reintroduce those food back in my diet. Those were okay. But fish, like I said, that's the one that was always the go-to. I was always the one that was the anchor to my diet.
Irvin, let's talk about something again similar that resonated with me. I was like, I've got to speak to this guy because I had a lot of symptoms. I had bloody stools. I had rheumatoid arthritis like symptoms. My hair and nails were falling out and cracking. I was losing weight dramatically. I'm 6'2" like you, and I got down to 127 pounds. I couldn't put on weight no matter how much I was forcing in my mouth. I was really, really sick. But the worst of them all for me was the brain fog.
Oh, yeah.
For those that have not experienced it, and I know you did, and it was a big reason why you chose to add meat back in your diet, I kept thinking to myself, am I getting this just old brain? Is this my lot in life? And until the brain switches back on with these animal foods, you don't realize how much brain fog you had. So let the listeners know about what you experienced, please.
For me, I would have to say that plagued me at least definitely throughout my whole vegetarian lifespan. And it was something that I thought it was normal because it was so present in my life. And because I was fit, but I was not healthy. But because I was fit, so I think there's a nuance between both of them. A lot of people think that because they look fit, they're healthy. No, I was very fit, but I realized that I was not healthy because mentally speaking, I had this mental fog, this cloud that was constantly in my brain. I would start a lot of time. I would start something, never being able to finish, not really knowing, understanding why, not have the motivation to actually finish it. You know, regular stuff like just cleaning up the house, my apartment. Sometimes it could take me up to 4 hours to clean up a small little apartment because I would start, can't finish, demotivated, whatever, whatnot. So I would really have to pump myself, psych myself out, or let the apartment get to a level where, you know what, it's unbearable. You have to clean it in order for me to really get on top of it. So that really plagued me. Even when I had my kids, then that was something that was always present. I never understood why. I could never put my finger on it. I just simply said, you know what? It's just part of it. It's maybe just what it is. And I never made a big fuss about it until later on, until my mother passed away, and I went through a depression maybe a year and a half after she passed away. And that's when I was like, the brain fog intensified. It was like I was walking on clouds every day for like at least 2 weeks or 2 weeks a month when she passed away. And I was like something, I said, I attributed that to the fact that I was mourning. Then I realized it was more than that. And shortly after she passed away, or before I think she passed away, very, very shortly, that's when I had introduced me to my diet because I was like, my body just needed it somehow, some way. And it's only, I would say, about 9 months ago, when I became a carnivore, and the brain fog completely disappeared. And I was like, wait a minute, something is up. I'm not feeling, I'm not, this fogginess in my mind, the mental clarity was very, very apparent. Focus was there. Now it's like it's not hard for me to say, okay, I gotta get up, go do this, go do that. If I want to start something, I'll start it, I'll finish it. I'm so much more efficient, so much more clear-minded. I mean, there's a lot of things that still needs to be worked on, but that the difference and everything that I could talk about and that I could pinpoint and that I could say is really, really the most apparent thing is my brain fog. That's the thing I could say for a fact. That's what, to me, is the biggest surprise in this whole lifestyle for me.
I speak to a lot of folks that are transitioning over to this way of eating, that are coming from plant-based backgrounds, that have exhausted and are trying to heal themselves. And primarily what I find is a lot of people, yes, the physical benefits are great. We know that. We know that with a carnivore diet, especially, and we're going to get into how easily you can put on muscle. But the gift that is everyone finds unbelievable are the mental benefits. I, like you, had sort of those last year and a half, 2 years, suffered from depression and anxiety. My doctor wanted to put me on antidepressants, and I'm like, I've never been depressed in my life. But looking back now, Des, I really was depressed quite severely and anxious. I had anxiety all the time. I couldn't sleep. You know, not only are you worried about what's going on with your health, but your body's just not functioning properly, as you say, metabolically. Would you say, and first of all, let me say, I was very sorry to hear about your mom. That's a huge loss for you. So my condolences. Prior to losing your mom, had you noticed anything about your mental state? I mean, besides the brain fog, had you noticed that? I know that would be a big impact, but
I never thought of myself of someone who had mental issues. I never thought it's not something for me that I even considered. Not that it was impossible, but that I never considered it. But the only thing that I realized is that I did have had certain suicidal thoughts throughout the time, and I always try to dismiss them, brush them aside, and man, that's not possible. And knowing how it's something that's so taboo in our culture, in our community, it's not something that I wanted to talk about. Mental health issues and suicidal thoughts is something that's very taboo, but yet it happens so often in our community. And I know so many people of Haitian background that committed suicide. So, adults, youths, so many Haitian folks. And I'm not even talking about Jamaicans and Trinidadians, Bajans, or just in my community alone that I have mental issues. So, but those things are kind of sort of taboo. We don't really want to tackle these conversations and talk about them, but they're there. So this is something that, therefore, for me, was something like, even though it could have came to my mind, I was like, nah, just pushing on the side, man. It's not. So I never really flirted too tough with the idea until when my mom passed away, and that's when I was like, you know what, I can't even control this. I'm going through too much. It's too heavy, and then I broke down. I had to take off from work for like 4 to 6 months, and I had to see a therapist. And so therefore, that's when I was like, you know what, I really got to do something about this.
Especially being a male for you and I, that's even harder sometimes to talk about, as you and I know, and it needs to be talked about a lot more. So I appreciate you sharing that. I want to sort of segue into the next sort of stage, which I found very interesting. Similar again to you, we share some similar backgrounds, is how you finally found this way of eating. I know you came across some things and we're like, man, I'm listening to these doctors going, these guys are starting to make some sense. So how did it work for you?
So prior to go fully carnivore, I had started eating meat a few years prior. So I was already watching some stuff. There was a doctor that kind of enlightened me a lot on that stuff with Dr. Kaufman. I don't know if you ever heard of him. There's Dr. Kaufman. He's the one who kind of made me realize the importance of collagen for the brain, and that these are some of the nutrients that you could only find in animal byproduct, and fat, also saturated fat. So he's the one who made me realize these things. So my mind was already open to that. Okay, fat is very essential for the brain. Collagen is very essential for the brain. So last January of 2022, I have a good friend of mine named Julio, sends me a video of Dr. Baker, obviously making fun of vegans. And I started laughing. I was like, this guy's hilarious. I said, this guy's buff in his 50s, strictly carnivore, showing pictures of his meals and videos and giving you proofs, and he's a doctor. And I was like, wow, okay. So I started watching some of his videos. Then from Dr. Baker, I fell almost simultaneously on Ken Berry and Dr. Shafee. So those to me were like the ultimate horsemen of this whole carnivore thing, you know? So then I started eating up their videos, man. Baker, Barry, the way he was coming at it, Shafee, the way the always the receipts and the facts and I was like, man, this is intense. So I did a whole, I would say 6 to 8 months of completely indulging in their videos, reading articles, and I fell on some other people such as Elizabeth Bright, Sally Norton, you name them. I fell on dozens and dozens of them, and I was like, "This is crazy." There's a page. I fell on that page too. So many. Then I started reading books. Then I started getting into books. As soon as Sally Norton books came out, I read it. I bought Elizabeth Bright's book. I read Ken Berry's book. I read at least half a dozen, if not more, books on the subject because I was like, you know what, I need to really see what's going on. And the thing that I did, I said, you know what, enough is enough. Now I need to try it. And that's when I dived into it in August. First week of August of 2022 is when I dove into the carnivore diet. I called one of my friends and I said, listen, I want to talk to you about something that I've been seeing for the past 6, 7 months. I never told you anything about it because I didn't want you to think I was crazy. So I really looked into it. But I'm telling you, I think this is the real deal. I think we've been living in a nutritional matrix, and I think I got the red pill out of this one. So I sent them Shafee's videos, Baker's videos, Barry, and he came back to me maybe a week and he said, "You Daz, I'm going for carnivore," and we started it together. And that's how we started it. Yeah.
Good for you, Daz. And so many of the folks I talk to, like myself, when that brain fog lifts and you start to realize and say to yourself, as I often talk about on my podcast, is that you get that red pilled moment when you go, man, and the stuff you're reading and the stuff you're understanding starts to come into focus, because fog to focus, I talk about it quite often. You go, man, what else have I been duped on? What else have I been told that is not factually correct? But all the people that you mentioned, same with me. And I'm so glad, because here's a point I want to talk to you about. I'm so glad you found Sally Norton, because she was the key for me. I have to tell folks who know my story, I found her first because it really bent my mind to understand that plants are out to harm us, or can be out to harm us through their toxicities, especially oxalates, which she's an expert in. And the moment I started to wrap my mind around that, I thought, I've been doing this all wrong. Specifically, the high oxalate plants that she had was the ones that I was bombing myself with every day. Spinach, chia seeds, chocolate, almond milk, you name it. I was the highest oxalate content every day. No wonder I felt terrible. But you also, Daz, it all often talked about that you had some issues leading up to you making the switch, things like plantar fasciitis and a lot of aches and pains as you progressed on the sort of plant-based vegan way of eating. When you were reading folks like Sally Norton, did you sort of things start to click to you and go, oh man, no wonder I'm feeling like I'm much older than I am?
Absolutely. Exactly. This is the reason why, the leading reason was the brain fog. I said, let me try this to see the brain fog. Obviously, I was seeing a lot of testimonies of people coming out with a bunch of aches and ailments, physical issues, and that got fixed. But my main focus was the brain fog. But as I'm going through the journey, I'm noticing, hold up, my back is not hurting the way it used to. My ankle is not swollen the way it used to be. My feet is not hurting the way it used to. My arms, my joints, like my elbows, my tendonitis are gone. Like so all of a sudden I'm seeing all these things going away, and I'm able to go back to being able to do certain things that I was not able to do, like regular squats. I was not able to do them anymore. One of my favorite positions is called the primal squat, where you're completely down, your hips are down, you're sitting on your heels. That's a position I was able to sit in that position for half an hour if I wanted to. I was not able to do that position for the last 5 years. It was almost gone for me, almost gone, completely gone, because I had issues in my knees. So then I was able to do that again. I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm able to get back in that position, back to my squats, back to my jumping. I was not able to jump because of my fasciitis, back to being able to jump. So a lot of things that I didn't even expect to go away went away. So that was enough said. I didn't have to go any further. I didn't have to try to find it. That was for me. I just, that was the fountain of youth right there for me. That's the fountain of youth right there for me. It works for me. I'm not going to say wholeheartedly it works for everybody. It works for me. I believe that this elimination diet is a form of finding out what works and what doesn't work. And I would say right now, I'm mainly 95%, 98% really carnivore. I do vegetables, no kales, no spinach, no greens. I'm not into any greens. None of that for me. I'll dabble into onions here and there because I've tried it and it sits well with me. So I still do the onions. I'll do the lettuce, which is also a very low oxalate type of food. I'll still do the lettuce here and there. Like when if I want to go buy a burger, I'm on the street and I'm in A&W, which is a French fast food. Canadian fast food over here. I will buy my burger, my 5-ounce burger, and I'll have them put in a lettuce wrap. I'll do that, but that sits well with me. It doesn't affect me. I don't feel no inflammation afterwards when I eat that. And I'm also very aware of oxalate dumping. So I really try to keep it to very, very low oxalate vegetables such as lettuce and onions. And that's pretty much what I do. Fruits, once in a blue moon, I'll have less than a handful of berries, for example, blueberries. I don't go fruits, or I'll eat one piece of pineapple if I go breakfast with my girl because she likes to go to a restaurant, even though I hate going to the restaurant anymore. It's just my whole life has completely changed. I used to be a guy that spent $10,000 to $15,000 a year. After I did my taxes, I realized in restaurants. Now, if I do $1,000, it's wow. Because I hate going to the restaurant because I'm like, you know what? Why would I go spend that money when I could use that money to buy myself a week worth of meat? And my girl, she doesn't get it, but I'm like, man, this is a week worth of meat for me, man. That's like, so go to the restaurant. Plus, I'm like, they might be using, seed oils. I'm not trying to go there. Vegetable oils. I don't want to go to any of that. So, but most of the fast food joints, they don't use seed oils for their burgers. So if you go to McDonald's or A&W, Burger King, I've asked around. They don't use seed oil when they make their burgers because of the fat and the meat. So people don't even realize you could even go to McDonald's, Burger King's, A&W, all these fast food joints, just order the meat patties. Sometimes I order like 4 quarter pounder. That's a pound of meat for like $15. And I'm good for like 5 hours. I have no hunger. I'm satiated, and I just spent $15 and I'm good. And it's way more healthy than if I would have taken the bun and the fries and the Coca-Cola, and that's all I need. But people will look at me like I'm crazy, but that's all I need. It's much healthier to do it like that and cheaper than to try to go, I want to feed myself a bunch of carbohydrates and, a bunch of sugar and a bunch of this and a bunch of that. I just stick to the meat, man. And sometimes I may add some cheese on it. I may, but and that's it.
That was going to be my next question, Daz. Have you since been able to tolerate dairy a little better since eating this way?
Absolutely. I mean, I still don't go too crazy on it. I'll go a period. Let's just say for a week, I'll have some cheese. Then I'll go a whole week or two, no cheese, no heavy dairy. I'll do kefir. That's something I like to do, kefir. I do kefir, so I'll drink kefir also once in a while, but I don't overdo dairy. What I overdo is my red meat. That's just something that has to be part of my baseline. My red meat is there. My steaks and beef patties, that's every day. I need that. If I don't have that every day, I don't feel good. I need to have my meat, man. My fatty meats.
Oh, yes, sir. And I'm so aligned with your way of thinking, Daz. That is very, very similar. And I'm so proud that you have gone down like I have and read the books and understand the oxalate dumping symptoms. That was part of my journey. I added, like you did, I chose fruits. I haven't eaten any vegetables since I turned carnivore for over a year and a bit now. But I use blueberries myself, and I am also using dairy more than you are, but I have a specific goal in mind. I'm trying to gain weight back because I was so emaciated, and dairy is quite an easy way, as you know, to put on weight. So it's working for me. With that being said, lead the listeners through now for you what a typical day of eating looks like. And are you doing OMAD, 1 meal a day, 2 MAD, or 3 meals a day? How are you doing it?
Sometimes I'm OMAD. Sometimes I'll do 1 meal a day, but most of the time it's 2 meals a day. So I would have to say it's too mad. That 2 meals a day is what I usually do. I wake up, I still drink coffee. That's one of my vices. But it's funny because coffee is not something that I used to drink prior. I only started drinking coffee 5, 6 years ago because I used to be a city bus driver. And I used to work the graveyard shift, the night shift. Then because of working the night shift, I started drinking coffee. Sometimes I would get tired, and that would be kind of the boost that would give me back the energy to drive at night. So that's when I started drinking coffee. Prior to that, my vegetarian vegan lifestyle, never drank coffee. So it's really a new thing for me. So I know maybe down the line I might have to put it away, but for now, I wake up, I break 6 eggs in the blender, raw eggs. I put maybe 150 to 200 grams of butter. I'll add maybe 1 teaspoon of honey, raw honey, and I'll put my organic Ethiopian coffee in there. I grind my own coffee. I make my coffee. I grind my coffee. I put it in there, and that will be how I start my day. So that usually holds me for like 4 hours before I eat anything else. And sometimes, then after that, I'll take 6 to 7 eggs with a little bit of beef. Sometimes it's steaks, sometimes it's beef patties, and that'll be my for my I would say my lunch. And nighttime, I'll have a 2, 3, sometimes 4 pound steak, and that's it. That will be my meal that will be my day. That's pretty much my routine every day.
Just going back to what you said about the restaurant eating, I was very much like you. I was always eating out, especially on my plant-based vegan days. I was constantly trying to find new places to go because, let's be honest, cooking vegan and plant-based, it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of produce you have to buy to combine things. If it was nut-based cheeses and blending, luckily my wife was the chef, so I wasn't really cooking, whereas I do all the cooking now because I love it, man. Even now, going out to eat, we hardly go out. We haven't gone out for a long time, and if we have, we usually end up being disappointed by the steaks because I can cook them so much better at home, don't you find?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm a steak expert now. All of them, like sirloin, a ribeye, T-bones, you name them. I cook them all, and I enjoy them all.
Let's talk a bit about, as we sort of start to wind down a little bit, as on the physical benefits, man, because I know you were talking about, you've gotten back into exercising, and you, like me, I mean, I posted my before and after pictures, and of course the haters come out and go, steroids. I'm like, no, I've never taken any. It's just this way of eating. You put on muscle so easily when you're eating the amount of protein that we do. And yes, there's movement and there's hard work in there, but even in my plant-based days, I would never put on muscle as this easy. Are you the same way?
Absolutely. I started gaining weight. Listen, I'm 6'2". Now I'm 240, 245. I used to be between 165. We'll say my early 20s up until my mid 30s. I was up to the highest I went was 180, maybe 185. That's it. I could never pass that threshold. So when I started introducing, before I introduced meat, what I introduced to my diet was eggs. So when I introduced eggs, that's when I noticed, man, I'm getting a little more muscular, Yes, I was doing a little bit more pull-ups and push-ups, but for some reason, I gained a little mass. But when I introduced meat, that's when all of a sudden my muscle mass is like, whoa, what's going on? Now I could go maybe a week or two without doing any forms of for exercise, even a month, and my musculature is still there. I'm not losing anything, man. The weight that I lost when I started Carnivore was a lot of water weight and a lot of extra fat that I was eating from the sugar fat that I was eating from all the carbohydrate that I was eating. So that's an extra 50 pounds that I lost. But that wasn't muscle. That was really fat. The muscle mass that I have now, it's staying on me. Like I'm seeing my abs, my six packs is back. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I'm getting older and I'm getting way more muscular. What's going on? And it's so much easier for me. I drop down every day. So you know what? I want to feel pumped up. Drop down, do 200 push-ups, and I'm good. Every day I do that for like a week, and next thing you know, my chest looks so much pumped up, my arms look so much pumped up, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing,
You hearkened on before and talked about prior. It's also the recovery period. Like, yeah, you can bust your butt in exercise, but the next day you're like, I can go again. I remember when, in my plant-based days, I'll be like, man, I got to take a few days off. I can't, I'm too sore. But it's like Dr. Chafee says, he just would keep going and going and going. And he was like, this is crazy. The recovery, I'm 50 now, Daz, and I feel better than I have in 20 years back. I feel like it's like, is a dear friend of mine, Casey Ruff, who runs another podcast, says it's like the Benjamin Button of diets. You're aging in reverse.
It's absolutely crazy. I know. I know. I mean, and there's so much people that, I mean, when I say that too, they're like, man, you're crazy. Your heart attack, your cholesterol. I mean, there's this ancient biology that people are still talking about these myths, because they're literally myths, because they're talking about this, but there's no solid clinical studies on these things. There's no proofs of that. There's no data that really backs up any of this stuff. But yet, people, they swear by these things. Whenever I say, you need to look into Enso Keys. You need to look into, you need to look into some of the information where we get these narratives from. I read which is the book that I read. It's called The Great Plant-Based Con. I actually read it because I read the book, man. I didn't read it, and I was like, man, everybody needs to read this book. Jane Buxton, she's on the money with that, man. I was like, wow, this is absolutely what people need to understand. They need to know that these are narratives that were put by a lot of corporations, a lot of people in power to benefit their pockets. It's not they're not doing this for the benefit of the population. Absolutely not. Just like pharmaceuticals, they're not doing anything for our benefits. They're doing everything for their benefits. And I think that's something that people need to get a grasp of and really understand. This is not no conspiracy. This is what's happening. This is going on. A lot of these companies have lawsuits because of malpractices or because of drugs that were not supposed to be on the market, stuff like that. And same thing with the food pyramids and the foods that are being sold with companies like Coca-Cola. When you even Ellen White from the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Kellogg's and a lot of these things that I realized that they all connect. They all are tied up to the cultural myth that we have today, and the belief, the narrative that we have about nutrition, about health, about the medical system, about the pharmaceutical world. So all these things are tied in and they're connected, but that information are usually in books and people don't read anymore, and so I guess a lot of the stuff they're not promoting in the news like they are. That's why it's very important, like podcasts like your podcast, Shafee's podcast, Baker's podcast. Those podcasts are extremely important because these are grassroots movement that are bringing the truth back into light. It's very important.
Talking with Jane Buxton as I did, I had her on the show, and it was just such an honor to talk to her because this lady came with the facts, man, and she backed them up 150% with evidence. And she, as she said on my podcast, she's getting a lot of pushback, a lot of hate, to the point where she had to come off social media for a time. And I can understand. I'm getting it now too, man. And let's talk about that for a second, Daz, because before we sort of wind down, you mentioned on Dr. Chafee's podcast that you may have been slightly one of those folks that gave people a hard time. I admittedly put stuff out there and posted it on social media and told people this is the way I was eating, and I put it out and said this is the way for the future. And now that I understand better, but I understand, man. Dr. Chafee laughed. You said you used to throw people out of your house for bringing meat in there. Is that true?
I did not allow people to cook meat in my house or eat meat in my house. That was a no. I did not. Listen, I was an ideologue. I apologize to anybody whom I ever made you feel a way because of that. I really do. But I really believed in what I believed. Listen, I did not judge people because of the way they ate, but I was very opinionated about my beliefs and about what I thought about this lifestyle. So whenever the conversation would come up, I would not shy away from saying what I had to say. Like I said, not judgmental, but when it came to my space, don't bring it to my house. Don't do it in my space. And I would not be afraid to also post stuff about that. And I wouldn't shy away with that. Today I realize it. I was wrong, and that's one thing. I'm not afraid to admit that I was wrong. And if at the time somebody would have came and proved me wrong, that would have been it. That I'm wrong. I have to change my ways, which is what happened. I realized that I was wrong, And I'm not afraid to admit that. And this is something that I think a lot of people, they fear that. They fear the humbleness. They fear to be humble. Me, I'm nowhere near afraid to be humble because it's not about me. I'm searching for the truth. So this is why even in this lifestyle right now, I'm open. Even though I believe in carnivore, I believe that a meat-based diet for humankind, for human being, is the best way to go. I'm still open. I believe that some people, they may not sit well on eating only meat. They may have to introduce a little bit of vegetable here and there, a little bit of fruits here and there, and I get it. That's okay. I'm not gonna say, "Oh no, you can't do that." I'm no longer the ideologue that I was when I was a vegan. But what I do understand, though, I do understand that meat is definitely part of the most optimal nutrition that we could do to ourselves. So that I understand that it should always be a baseline to how we eat. So for me, that I get it. Not to say don't eat this, you can't eat that. That's if it works for you, it works for you. I tried it. I realized that it doesn't work for me. I did a overload of vegetables and kales and juices and spinach smoothies and all that stuff. And now I'm putting that away, and I might never have to put that back in my life again because I don't need it. I understand that these foods, we could eat them, but they're definitely not essential. We do not need them to survive. However, we need the animal byproducts to survive. These are essential for optimal lifestyle for our biochemical organism. We need these things. So I do understand that. I'm aware of that. And I believe that if we say we want to be scientists or we want to be more scientifically inclined, that's how we have to think. Scientism is something that's very prevalent in people's minds. They take science like a religion and they say, but no, a true scientist will always question the science in front of them. That's a true scientist. You always question to find out what is true. Because a lot of science, 50 years down the line, they realize that, oh, we were wrong, you know? And I realize that right now, when it comes to this lifestyle and this grassroots movement of carnivore, I understand people are like, oh, it's a diet. And I'm like, you know what? It's not really a diet. It's really a state of being, to be in ketosis. Your body is fat adapted. You burn fat. Your body uses fat as its main source of energy. It's not that it's a diet. It's that it's a state of being in. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get. They're still focusing, oh, it's a diet, it's a fat, it's a fat. No, it's not a fat. It's a state of anatomical being. That's how metabolically you process your energy and your food that way. And it's actually is more beneficial for the human body, really, you know?
Again, as we are so aligned, and I think, as you mentioned, the humbleness, admitting that you were wrong, that man, that harkens back to you, Rastafari, man, just being humble. You got to be humble and willing to admit. And clearly for both you and I, it's apparent. I was very much a proponent of the vegan plant-based way of eating. I never thought that I would veer for the rest of my life, but through the wisdom of others and through experimentation on my own body, I realized that it is not optimal. And, a lot of the plant-based vegans got bent out of shape when I went on Dr. Baker's podcast and I said, whatever you do, please don't go vegan. And I'm not telling people there, it was a please, because now knowing what I know, I don't want people to have to suffer like I did. I really don't. And you can eat all the vegetables you want. I always stick my flag in the ground and say, if you're going to do that, make sure the low oxalate, least toxic varieties that you can find, but please try and incorporate some animal protein in your diet. We ancestrally, this is the way we ate to develop how we are now as humans. And as Dr. Berry once tweeted, the vegan diet is unprecedented in human history. And that's a fact.
It's a fact.
We're still experimenting on ourselves. And unfortunately, despite what people are putting out there and what we're seeing, Dr. Baker's interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of ex-vegans now, that long-term, there are some consequences because you are going to be deficient in certain things that we know we find in animal foods. And Jane Buxton, in her book, The Great Plant-Based Con, as Daz eloquently said, it highlights all of this. Well, my last question is, and we were speaking of pushback, and you mentioned, your family. How have they been receiving this? I know you said you raised your kids as vegetarians. Are any of them thinking of making a switch? Have they made switches since you did?
I have to say, I think till this day, I believe it's the biggest mistake that I've made. And I'm hoping to make, when I appear on these podcasts, or by the example of my life, I'm hoping that that's going to be able to influence them back to a proper human diet. And yeah, they're vegetarian for the most part, all my children. And my daughter, who eats meat now, when she was actually 8 years old, she was diagnosed with the Guillain-Barré syndrome. Yeah, so it was a absolutely atrocious moment in my life, in our lives. She was at the hospital. She had like dozens of IV going through her body. She could not move. It had completely struck her down. The only thing she was able to really move was probably her lips and her head. She was completely paralyzed. The Guillain-Barré had taken over her whole body. Miraculously, I have to say, less than a month after being struck by the Guillain-Barré, she came out. Obviously, they said it was a vitamin D deficiency, and that was that. And another thing is, about a year and a half, my youngest daughter, who's 14 now, she was also diagnosed with rickets. And how we found out is one day, the girl that I was with at the time, with whom I had the child with, she came out the room and she said, "Daz, something's wrong with our daughter." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, I was changing her diaper and I touched her and she went out, out. And I'm like, and mind you, she wasn't walking yet, which was very strange for my children, because I have four daughters and a boy, and all my daughters, maybe for the exception of one, they all walked before one, or in the cusp of 12 months. This one, she was almost a year and a half and she wasn't walking. So I was like, something's wrong. Like, what's going on? Like, she's not walking, and she was very feeble. And at the time, my girlfriend, when she touched her, she had fractured I think it was her arm or elbow or something like that. So we took, and when I went and I saw my daughter, she was in the bed, and her arm, the way she was, I was like, something is wrong. We took her to the hospital emergency right away. So when we took her to the emergency, then, diagnosed and everything, and told her she had rickets. Again, another vitamin D deficiency. And I was like, wow. And you know what? The funny thing about I only put two and two together maybe in this past January or February. I was like, look, after all the information that I've been gathering in the books, I was like, yo, this is why my daughters had these issues, because of the lifestyle that I brought them in. And I was so distraught about the situation. I was like, wow, I may have created this situation in their lives, not purposely. I thought I was doing the right thing. Surely in my heart, I believed that this was the proper way, but I actually hurt my children by doing this thing. And it's so much the biggest regret of my life. And I was like, and it's only now that I realized it. So we could do, by going to this lifestyle, and I'm not trying to preach to anybody, you could actually do more harm to yourself and to your family than you could ever imagine. I always say, to be a vegan or a vegetarian, you have to be a biochemist. You have to know and understand the proper amount of nutrients, the proper amount of vitamin that you're putting in your body, the supplements, because there's no way you could be a vegan and a vegetarian and be fully healthy unless you're aware of all these information. And very few people are biochemists or scientists that are becoming vegan or vegetarian. So it's very, very, extremely difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's extremely difficult to be fully healthy and to have all your nutrients under that lifestyle. Very difficult.
Irvin Dazl St-Louis, man, this has been an absolute honor and a pleasure, my brother. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time out to chat with me. Before we sort of end out, where can folks find you online, man, so they can connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram, Dazl Regiment, Dazl, D-A-Z-L, Regiment, like the Army Regiment. So you'll find me. That's probably the first thing that's going to come up. Or under the same name on Facebook, it's also Dazl Regiment. I'm always there. That's why I always post some of my fitness videos or dancing videos also. So that's the best way to find me, on Instagram and Facebook.
Before I sign off, I just want to say that one of the ones I really appreciated was the one with you and the 91-year-old lady that you were dancing with. Tell us about her.
Oh man, she's fantastic. I've been training her for maybe over 5 years now, and she's such a young heart. She believes in movement and being active. She's actually a very active person. She does the gardening, and man, and every exercise that I do with her it's always geared towards something functional that she's going to be using, whether it's bending down for her to do her gardening, whether it's to work her brain. Like, so the exercise that you saw in the video was actually an exercise that I do to stimulate the left and brain, the right side of your brain every time before you do an exercise. So when I first started doing it with her, I think the first few years ago, she was having such a hard time because of the coordination, and now she's just going full on at it, and her coordination is so great at 90 years old. She's able to, her brain, man, her memory, her focus is just sharp and there. So she's just a lovely human being that believes in my training techniques, and that believes even more so in staying focused and motivated and continuing to move and continuing to think, positively,
We appreciate you and everything that you do, my friend. Thanks so much again for taking the time out today.
Thank you very much, my man. Hopefully we'll talk again and we'll stay in contact. Be well.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.